together with the research officers, are jointly hosting this workshop. Before we start, I would like to call upon Olo to lead us in prayer, please. For a series of workshops will be carried out for the purpose of supporting the capacity development of the education sector-wide staff. This includes the NUS, MESC, as well as SQA in the area of research. Now, today's workshop is focused mainly on time and workload management, co-creating a way forward. Without further ado, I'd like to call upon Visitor Dr. Desmond Lehan to officially open this workshop for his officially opening remarks.
La fantonu malama ma biltonu li fi mai au tatu fa mo le so mo fa afta ile tu tatu o mi tu san fu ya atu am te via ya o mal fana afta fu lo fa pe ona mo pe tu suma ele mania ya o tato kaomani velifo pe le fa mo ya ina te puni to mai mana va ya la ta pena o final va le mate university ya ta pena ya tato education sector ini fa pia fai o fatto non tanto male si fu o in fanno le nato le fatti noi non sai di ya wal fa le o tanto male ya fatto na fu i si ta fa tanto male na fa sette no via ya to mai ma no va fatti noi non sai di ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the Vice Chancellor, we welcome you all to this workshop, which promises to be a series of training workshops that hopefully will help with the building of capacity and skills for research, not only for us and our NUS staff, but also across the sector with SQA and MESC. I also wish to thank the Faculty of Business and for initiating these workshops, and also the guidance of our research manager, Emily, which has led to the opening of the FOBE workshops to become not only university-wide workshops, but also sector-wide workshops. I think regardless of who hosts these workshops, the important message is that it is for staff capability development, and it is to build the capacity of staff so that we get the critical mass to make progress and effect change in our faculties, our schools, our university, and our sector. So without further ado, thank you for your participation today. Please sign up for the next workshops. They have been organized for you. I wish you well, happy learning, safely.
I used to teach in universities in Auckland, in Waikato, and in Bethlehem. And when I did presentations, I often would incorporate a scripture, a verse from the Bible, as a way to encourage the students, and as a way of encouragement. And so it's with pleasure to include this scripture from the Bible today in Psalm 1. And I was wondering if someone would be kind enough to read this out loud. Any volunteers?
Utamafaya mea malava ona o le o lo whaamanosi mai I a te a.
And can I please have a volunteer to read the English version? All right.
I can do all things through Christ who gives me strength.
Mm-hmm.
Amen.
Amen. And thank God that we do have a greater being who can help us to manage our workload and to manage our time, because He is the creator of time and space. So we do call upon His help today as we go through this workshop. I am aware of the presence of many experienced, skilled academics, educators, educational leaders in this room. And like my mother used to say to me, Emily, there's nothing new under the sun. So for many of you, this may be just a refresher course, and that would be great too. All right, so the outline of today's session. Thank you to Dr. Pesata. We've officially opened. We're going to do some quick introductions, and then we're going to have a look at the academic and the teaching staff workload policy. And just to remind ourselves what is actually written there, and then what is the reality on the ground. How to manage time and your workload? Well, there are hundreds of tips that you will find online and in books. A lot of research has also been conducted in universities around the world with their staff to find out how do they manage their time and their workload. I found a very good published article on time management for new faculty. Now, this is, when I read it, I thought, oh, this is good for anyone, even someone who's been in faculty for 30 years. It's actually good to be reminded of some time-saving workload management strategies. So there's an article here for everyone, and we will, Dr. Naz will upload this article online. And then there was there was a blog actually by an academic, and he beautifully bullet pointed some time-saving strategies in 3 areas: in teaching, in research and scholarship, and then in service, which fits nicely with the way that our workload has been divided into 3 sections, right? Teaching, research and scholarship, and service to the community, NUS, and to our discipline. So that's another really good handout, and I wanted to do that because we don't have time to go through all the strategies. And then we'll end off with a prayer of gratitude. Okay. We tried to stick to time, but that's roughly how we've got it scheduled for today, finishing at 3:30. All right. I just want you to spend the next 2 minutes. Choose the person beside you, who's sitting beside you, and I want you to choose one of these questions that you will respond to with your colleague. All right? So the first question is, what is one thing you are most grateful for? And number 2, how did you help someone today? In fact, there is a neuroscientific premise to this particular activity. It's not just to fill in time. It's not just to make you feel good. There is a scientific premise to why this activity would work with students and with colleagues when we are gathering for PD. So would you just take 2 minutes, have a little chat with each other, introduce yourselves if you haven't done so, and then we'll come back after 2 minutes. All right? All right, just 1 more minute. 1 more minute.
For my son, for its existence in my life.
And the second one is helping the students to understand the creation of life, or starting to understand the creation of life. That's it.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you.
Wake up in the morning and greet the sun in the morning. And I and my partner share the services.
Amen.
I am very grateful and thank you, Lord, that no flooding in our place. I am so thankful for that one.
Yes.
And for today's service, the whole day we've been busy helping the students, the board to guide them their relevance programs and to sign their job goals and edit goals. So thank you. Thank you. That's right.
Thank you for sharing. If we massage our foreforearm amygdala, that's that part of your brain that's the emotional center. If I be a foreforearm amygdala and you massage it with positive words, where the student is forced to think of something positive, it starts to create neural pathways that stimulates learning. And that's one of our roles as educators, prepare our students to learn. As a facilitator, I'm wanting to prepare you to receive, to be in the best possible emotional state to receive. So something as simple as that is helpful in a classroom situation. All right, let's get into the nitty-gritty. Let's go to the prefrontal cortex of the brain, where we do the reasoning. So here we have the academic and teaching staff workload policy, amended in 2018. Right. And I think you're aware of it. It's something that you may not have looked at. Maybe when you signed your contract, you saw the 40-40-20 or whatever it was for your particular role, filed your job description away, and then you just get busy. You just get busy doing what you need to do. But this is just to remind us that this is what we try to live out. It's a notional guideline. Notional meaning it's theoretical and oftentimes unrealistic. As I'm sure I can see a few heads nodding, that is the reality that we all live with as well. But have a look at this. So grade 1, grade 2 lecturer and the senior lecturer, there is an expectation that you would teach for 40% of the time. And we're talking about a 40-hour week. Alright, so 40% of a 40-hour business week is 16 hours. And then 40% research. At least 16 hours during the business day from when you come to work, whether that's 9 to 5 or 8 to 4, 16 of those hours is expected to be dedicated to research, whether you're just reading, taking notes, looking for grants that you can apply for, but that's the expectation. And then a 20%, 8 hours of the 40-hour week is dedicated to serving the NUS in some way, the community, or furthering your discipline. All right. When we look at the grade 3 lecturer, according to the policy, they are expected to teach for a minimum of 21 hours, which equals 52.5% of a 40-hour week. All right, but because they are not engaged in research, there is not that there's not a written expectation, a written obligation for them to research. However, there is a silent expectation for them to research. But according to the policy, it's black and white, isn't it? 0% research, 52.5% to 80% of that 40-hour week is dedicated to teaching. And there is still the 8 hours of service to those 3 areas, community, NUS, and the discipline, the field that you are in. We come down to the head of department or the head of school, right, 30%. that's 12 hours, but there is a minimum of 12 hours, 40% research, and 12 hours for the head of school, 12 hours of service. Coming down to the dean, or the director, in our case the director of CSS, there's an expectation of 30 teaching, 20% research, and 50, a minimum of 20 hours of service in those three areas again. And last but not least, our professorial staff, our professors and associate professors. What is the expectation according to the policy? That our professors and associates will be teaching 20% of the 40-hour week, all right, which equals what? How many hours is that?
6.
It's 8, but in the policy it does say minimum of 6. There's a huge percentage in research, 60%, which equals 24 hours, and then there's 20% service again. What do you think? It's a notional guideline, isn't it?
Well,
Yeah. Okay, but you know the reality of these things, and this is why we, when I was talking with Dr. Naz, we thought, you know, probably it's good to have a look at the policy before we launch into the workload, managing our workload and managing our time. Right? The two, yeah, we decided to go this way. So here's the reality. I came to learn that we also take into account that for every hour of contact teaching, contact face-to-face or contact online, right, an hour is added for 3 things: for planning, preparation, and marking, physical marking of assignments. So we're not talking about summative assessment or formative assessment. That formative and summative assessment take place during your contact, all right? But the physical marking of assignments is included in that extra hour that's added on. So for example, for our grade 1, grade 2 lecturers, if they are teaching 16 hours in a 40-hour week, they're teaching 16 hours face-to-face, another 16 hours is expected or given to them to what? To plan, prepare, and mark. So if the grade 1, grade 2, and senior lecturer, if they are doing those 3 things, just those 3 things, we're not even talking about practical visits, we're not talking about consultations with students. There's so much more that you do, isn't there? So much more that happens incidentally, that happens spontaneously. But just for those 3 things, your hours have now bumped up to 32 hours. 32 business hours. Oh, that leaves you with 8 hours because you get paid for a 40-hour week.
Yep.
Wow, 8 hours left, and yet, look at this. We'd like you to do 16 hours research, please. Can you fit that into your 40-hour week?
Sure.
You've got 32 hours to plan, prepare, and mark, and teach your students face-to-face or online, and then we'd like you to do another 16 hours research. Oh, and don't forget, we'd love you to serve us. Serve NUS, serve your community, serve your discipline. In total, that comes to 56 hours. So where are those extra hours coming from?
From weekends and
Yes.
over, evening work, because my total to this point is actually not 56 but 60 hours.
60 hours.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's coming from your family time,
Yeah.
right? Or from your own personal time, in the weekends and in the evenings during the week.
Yeah.
Are they, I can relate very well because I too taught. I taught, in New Zealand, and we had the same formula, 40, 40, 20. And I'll be honest, I did very little research. But what I learnt to do was to do research in a group, collectively. because I found like on my own I struggled. I just felt isolated, I felt discouraged, I felt unsupported, and I felt like I was not a good academic. But on the other hand, I valued teaching. I valued influencing the students for good. I wanted them to be the best teachers they could possibly be. So what we're saying here is even in our building, in the Taputo'i building, in the admin, GPE, and the vice, and the chat, we've all taught in universities. We're all aware of this, and we want to reassure you that we know it's not easy, but we've got to find a way forward. We've got to find a way to try and minimize the stress that our academic, our faculty, department centre staff may be feeling. So we start today, but it will not finish here. And Dr. Pesata and the VC Aono have entrusted me to look into this, and they've been a wonderful support and help. And I know that together we can forge a way forward, step by step, starting with a very simple step of acknowledging this is a reality and sharing some time-saving workload management tips. But don't be discouraged. Don't think, oh, okay, we're just going to look at tips, but systematically nothing's going to change. It will take time. And we will need to all come up with solutions to help. Does that make sense? Yeah, but we've started the conversation, which you probably started, is that right, Dr. Pesata? You probably had this conversation many times. I know you're looking at me going, oh, she's new, she's excited, she'll give up soon. No, I won't, because I've been in education for 30 years, and I love it. I love it, despite the challenges. So we'll work through this together. Are there any comments? Yeah, thank you. And then down the back, and then back to Roberta.
To be truthful, I think this is the first time that I've really looked at this 40-40-20. For the past 7 years, I've coordinated the biggest course in the university, Foundation English. This semester we have 588 students. Past years we've had 800. And I can definitely say that 40-40-20 is, what if we have to, when we mark out 20% research papers? And I remember coordinating and teaching 5 tutorial groups, 25 students each. Research paper is 30 minutes per. And my children and my husband said, Mommy, you're a witch. That's how bad it got. Because we take all this work home, because we have a deadline. You have to get it in, and because henceforth is compulsory. I mean, foundation students. I'm currently working my PhD, and I'm so relieved to give that burden to someone else, more than me. And it said here, how did we help someone today? I helped the new coordinator. Trying to show her, well, how do we do this? We need part-timers. Oh dear. And I was very happy to serve her in the community by looking for part-timers.
Yes.
But now it's the first time I've really looked at that 40-40-20. And that's why many of my colleagues are not here, because they're working right now. They're already teaching. And some complain, oh, Diana, you're lucky. We wish we could go with you, but I just shut my mouth and came. But yeah, it's very nice. Now I got to see how sort of overworked. And when the semester finishes, I can tell you, I've landed in hospital. Many of my colleagues get pneumonia. It's pretty bad. I'm just talking from English. Thank you for making me see. And now I won't be a witch this semester. Thank you very much.
Thank you for sharing. Yes, I'm hoping that you won't go away downcast, thinking, oh my goodness, I am overworked and underpaid. What am I doing here?
Yeah.
I hope that you, which is a very real, natural, I know I've thought it and felt that many times myself. But we're here because we love learning, right, and teaching, and we care about our students. And that together we can forge a way systematically to try and minimize the stress and address this issue. We need to. I know it's on Dr. Pesata's heart and the VC. The VC has already started talking about some options, which we will at some point all come back and discuss again. So thank you, and I'm sorry you've been ill. But it's lovely that you've relinquished that and given it over to someone else. Okay, Roberta, you had a comment?
Yes, I won't go in the personal, because I'm sure that we all have horrible stories about our health and so forth. But I have a suggestion.
Yes.
Academic and teaching staff workload guidelines. How about we start changing the name instead of policy? Policy is something that it's, because we know already that this is not the reality. So I know a name is a noun, but sometimes, often enough, a term defines really, it's very important. So instead of policy is something that needs to be enforced. Now we know that this is not the reality. I'm a grade 3 lecturer, and I can tell you that I do research, which is connected also to my teaching, because unless I research, particularly in science, it's a constant renewal. Science and technology. So I cannot expect to put the same content often enough, depending on the topic I'm covering, that was valid 3 years ago or 5 years ago. No, it moves. So I'm always have to be abreast of the most, because I love the students. I love knowledge, just as we all do, and we want to give them the best. Yeah?
Lovely, thank you.
So perhaps.
Yeah, so Roberta, you're talking about reframing the way that this policy is.
Policy
Yeah.
instead, guidelines.
Guidelines, yeah, just
rather
reframing
than,
it.
yes.
And it takes the pressure off.
And there is more, it adds a more humane sort of dimension to it.
Yes, yes. Okay, I'm taking note of that. I love the idea of linking research and teaching. I think that's something that's really well worth exploring, in fact, where students themselves can be researching with the teacher. That can be your research activity. You could be sharing your own journey as a researcher with your students, sharing what you're learning from your research, including that in your course content. There's actually a number of ways that we can link teaching and research. We don't necessarily have to isolate and separate the two activities. So maybe that's something that we can maybe look at. Do you think, Dr. Pesata, is that an option?
Thank you. Just want to share with everyone. I do empathize with the situation that everyone is in. I've been trying to fight this policy for a long time. Even when I was dean, I was saying that it was impractical. But I'm now at a situation whereby Frank is no longer around. So we can actually change this policy.
Sorry. The dinosaur is gone.
And I, for a long time, I've also tried and encouraged staff that to begin doing research, you could begin as a classroom practitioner. So action research is what you should do to start doing research, because You know, you collect the data on their at-risk. Data can be published because you're actually monitoring their learning. And whatever, I mean, what comes out of that information, you feed back into your teaching to improve and make sure that student doesn't fail your course. So the whole process of doing the at-risk is actually an action research in itself. Because you are doing an intervention after you get that, because this is like a snapshot of where their learning is at in the middle of the semester, and you find out where they are, why they are like, why they're not coming to class or that. And then you can actually publish a paper. You can collaborate with another senior researcher who's also teaching, because you guys are in the same boat. You're doing the same exercise on the 7th week of every semester, the at-risk. And from there, it helps your teaching, improves your own classroom practice, and it builds a community of practice. So everything that you read in the literature, it's within your reach. You just need to have champions in your faculty to start doing that. I know with the big ask or the EDA policy, it's just difficult to find the time to start. But if you incorporate it in your teaching as you plan your classes, I remember the sleepless nights during the study week. That's when I can do my lab markings. When I was a lecturer in the Faculty of Science, Foundation of Science, Foundation Biology. So if I have like 80 students, it's 80 labs you mark every week, and you can't do that because you have a life after going home. So you end up piling them up until the study week, and it's the only time for us back then to spend nights here overnight in the office doing the math before the coast of Papaimalamala. So I do empathize with you guys, but we are in the right direction and the right track to try and thank you for the suggestion to call this a guideline rather than a strict policy to follow. So, after
So let's move on then, because this conversation doesn't end here. We'll continue this, possibly having focus groups, right, to keep addressing this issue. But in terms of, in view of what is already happening in our professional lives here at NUS, let's now turn to time, managing our time, which is about self-management. And it's also a basic requirement of a professional to be able to manage one's time and therefore one's workload. Under pressure? I used to say this. I used to think that I worked better under pressure. I said that for decades, actually, and it's only recently, because I'm a slow learner, that I've discovered that it actually causes me more pressure when I work under pressure. And in fact, I miss lots of opportunities. For example, today, if I hadn't finished this presentation earlier, if I was doing this presentation right up to the last minute, I would have missed out on going down to the Oluwamanu Centre to talk to Sydney and his team about research. And that was the only slot they had, and he rang me up and says, "Em, can you come down?" And I was so grateful that I could say yes. But in my previous life, as one who was quite disorganized, I would have said, I'm sorry, Sydney, I'm just working on something. Do you see what I mean? So, just something to think about, just to reevaluate that kind of thinking about under pressure, because we could miss some really valuable opportunities. Okay, what might be some of the challenges? I'm not telling you know what these are. These are some that I personally have experienced. I have pulled out from research with faculty staff. These tend to be the common thing. As Roberta said, she mentioned evening or weekend work. Working off site. Irregular teaching hours. Some of you do have you don't teach between 9 and 5, do you? Or 8 and 4. Some of you've got evening classes. Maybe weekend classes, I'm not sure here anyways. Large class numbers. Large amounts of marking, and they come in waves. That's a challenge. Frequent changes to the curriculum. That is a challenge and affects the way you manage your time and your workload. Organisational structure within your department or faculty or within NUS as a whole has an impact. Balancing admin with teaching. Yeah.
Not only with teaching, but also with research. I find administrative work
Yes.
is the one that I really, can I say, hate it. For policy papers to read
Yes.
and give comment.
And reports and yeah.
Well, luckily I don't have to write those. I leave those to the dean. But, you know, of course there is always need for consultation. So we get all this admin
a lot of admin.
papers
Yeah.
and normal
takes
administration. Anyway, I was preparing briefs for tutorials and that. So that's,
And if you add up the minutes that you spend stapling things, photocopying something, internet searching for this, if you add up all those minutes in the week that you're doing admin, you probably already know this, but it adds up to quite a lot, doesn't it? And then you subtract that from your 40-hour paid business week. Can you delegate some of that admin? Probably not. But that's,
some of it cannot be delegated.
All right, so we're just going to look at some 3 simple keys. All right, 3 simple keys. It's now 2:48. We've got 42 minutes left until we have a lovely afternoon tea, which you can take away with you or have here, and we can continue the conversation. All right, but we're going to just motor on. Is that all right with you?
Sure.
Yeah. Okay. So what might be some keys that could help? Just to remind you just to try and stay on track and manage your time and your workload. Prioritizing. Putting first things first. Doing the most important things first. Number 2, learning to say no. That's not easy. Even though I was born in New Zealand, or I consider myself all Samoa. Thank God for going to the US to come up above. I do find it hard to say no. It's the way I've been raised. But we need to address this because all the research would suggest that people who can manage their time and their workload are able to say no and to say no respectfully. And then number 3, scheduling. So you don't just prioritize your tasks, you then schedule. You put it into your calendar. You put it into your timetable. All right, so those are just 3 things, 3 basic functional strategies to remind us, to help us keep on track. All right. So Stephen Covey wrote a book called The 7 Habits of Successful People. And one of them was about putting first things first, prioritizing. And he came up with this lovely grid. Has anyone seen this grid before? Who has seen this grid before? No, the quadrant? No? Okay, so he suggested that professional people and even anyone divide their tasks into 4 quadrants. So you can actually make up a table like this and then get all your tasks and put them into these 4 quadrants. What's quadrant number 1? Here. It's a task that is really important and urgent. So what might an example be? A crisis. A crisis. In this case, it's the plural for crises. So you might have a crisis. There might be a student, in fact, who's come to your door and is quite suicidal. I've had those happen. I've had a girl come to me, she's just found out she's pregnant. And she's absolutely scared of her parents. That is a crisis. So would I put that, would I deal with that first? Is that urgent and is it important? Would I put that into this quadrant? Or would I put it here? This section here is not urgent, but it's still important. Things like you've got a big project, a big research project that you're working on. It may not be urgent at the moment because you're not publishing or there's no report to write straight away, but it's important. So things like planning, preparation, marking, professional development, prevention, these sorts of things go into this quadrant. Most of your time should be in this quadrant, according to Stephen Covey. And then this one, it's important, but it's not urgent. Then in quadrant 3, this is where you could delegate some of the emails, some of your social activities, internet searches. Here, the task is urgent, but it's not important. Can you think of something that is not urgent, but it's important? Yeah. Some email. You might have to respond to some emails.
Internet searches that
Yeah.
can be important, even though it's not urgent. Like
Yes.
you can delegate.
Yes, you could delegate someone to say, could you just go and have a look up, go and find this book for me? Do you mind? Or can you go and actually, yeah. So knowing what those tasks are, you could delegate. Or you could do it quickly, and you have to do it quickly. You don't take your time doing these ones, because that takes up your time. You either do it quickly, or you do it later, or you delegate. That's quadrant 3. Quadrant 4, you eliminate Facebook, Instagram, social media. There are some emails.
Yeah, I'm eliminating the social activities.
Oh, yes.
They go into the eliminate.
Into the
quadrant.
eliminate.
Yeah.
Negative chats.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah,
Rubbish.
that can weigh you down. Hey, fake it gala. That can eliminate. Eliminate. You've got a 40-hour week. You can do the talking outside in your personal hours, but while you're at work, you're a professional. You eliminate the fake it gala and the negative chat, because that's just going to weigh you down. You've got these things. You've got this to work on. This quadrant. This is where your focus should be, unless you've got a crisis or a deadline or quite a serious problem that you need to deal with. All right, so that's a lovely way of actually sorting out in your mind and then on paper your tasks. And the best time to do it is in the morning or the night before. Fill out this grid the night before you leave the office, or at home, or in the morning. As soon as you come in, do that. Prioritize. What does it mean to prioritize? I'm basically just repeating what I've just said, but in another format. So I've taken it out of the grid and putting it in bullet points. What I want to point out here is this. Maintain a list of accomplished tasks. Don't throw that list away, because that can inform your reporting. Have you even noticed that you might need to go back to your accomplished list and you need to remember when you had meetings, when you had agreements, when you put in a proposal. So don't throw away that list of accomplished tasks. You need that. Okay, so you might be wondering, well, is singa either urgent or important? Because sometimes people get those two mixed up, or they feel the same, urgent and important. Oh, well, everything's important and everything's urgent. There are times you just feel like you're so stressed, it's all a mess. I don't know, I feel that way too sometimes. And I can't even distinguish what's important, what's urgent, because I'm so stressed. But you have to be able to separate these two. Otherwise, that grid, the one that you just saw, is not going to work. You're going to get it all mixed up. And you're going to lose focus, and you're going to spend time doing the wrong thing. So what's the difference? A phone call, a text pinging, an email pops up, so while you're working in your office or you're talking to a student, those three things might be happening. Immediately it gets your attention, so it's urgent. You feel like, oh, I've got to pick up the phone, got to check the email, I've got to check the text. It may not be important, but it's urgent because it's got your attention straight away. So you may not need to deal with those things right at that minute. Why? Because those things, as soon as you turn your focus to the phone, to the email that's popped up, or to your text pinging, you lose focus, you lose your trail of thought. Does that happen? And then your brain has to rewire again. Another one could be when your colleagues are going for coffee. That's really urgent, isn't it? And it could be really important. I can always justify going for coffee with my colleagues, but it may not be the right thing to do at that time. You see? So you have to distinguish between urgent and important. And how you can do that is going back here. Going back to that grid. Knowing what's in here. And then knowing what's here. Alright? Okay, keep going. Okay, so how do we decide? But still, how do we decide? Like when I'm really stressed and urgent and important they look like and feel like the same thing. Well, you've got to know what your goals are and what your values are. So if your goal is to get a paper published, if your goal is for your students to all pass this semester, if your goal is to complete a course outline and review it in 2 weeks' time, it depends on what your goals are. That is what's going to help you determine what's important and what's urgent. What do you value? So you need to take time to think about that. Think that through. Set your goals. And then anything that happens, when that Facebook goes ding, I wonder if Naz, who's just gone and posted on Facebook, I wonder if that will help my research. I wonder if that will help my students. You see what I mean? Yeah? So know what your goals and values. Otherwise, you may be frequently spending all your time on tasks that are not important. If you're a list maker, this goes, and I've already said this, make up a table with a quadrant and put your activities in there. And then do the square number 1 first. And I do it. I've learned to do this, and I do it. I've had to. And I tell you what, I finished the week, and even though I think, oh, I didn't do everything, but I did the most important. And if you've only done one really important thing, and you still got those other things that you can do next week or next month or next year, some of those things on your list you could probably leave for a few months. It just depends on your goals and your values. Okay, learning to say no. Why is it important to say no? Any comments?
Yeah, sure. The values and the goals. If you continue to say yes, there are students, that may come all the time in my office, and then I never get to finish what I'm doing, and I make mistakes because I get constantly interrupted.
Yes.
So I say, turn around, go and come when your scheduled time is.
Set those boundaries.
Yeah.
I used to be the same because I love students and I love helping them. I never wanted anyone to fail. So I used to allow them to, I allowed them to cross my boundaries, basically. I allowed them to intrude. And I began to resent it because then I was behind and doing other
And
things.
also it doesn't make difference because talking about Facebook and
Yeah.
TikTok, this would be actually quite good to give to the students. They might start to think about it, about
Yes.
time management and what is urgent, what is important.
Yes.
Because this is the reality. So last year during the lockdown, my goodness, I was online at 3-4 o'clock in the morning.
Oh.
They nearly killed me, and yet, really, the passing rate was disgusting.
Yeah.
So it doesn't matter. So it needs something like this really
Yeah.
should go to the students, but seriously,
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I ended up telling my students, I made it really clear that I'd only be available during these office hours and that I wanted them to come in groups. So if they found someone else who had a similar problem or a similar issue, it was better that they came in 2s or 3s, even a group. And then I can address it in a lump sum rather than dealing with each individual person. So there are ways that you can manage your workload and your consultation time by asking your students, and they must come with questions. They don't just come and sit and look at you and smile and expect you to read their minds and do their assignment. They have to come with questions and they come in groups. That's better for you to manage.
I have a suggestion for that as well. Well, this is one way that I'm coping with all of this.
Yes.
I've organized a Moodle, a forum. There is a general forum whereby, I explain messages. You can use messaging if it's something really private. But if it's a question that relates coursework, your question is probably another 20 people's question. So you post it in the forum, and I will reply to everyone in the forum for everybody to see. So Moodle is fantastic. I mean, I'm using it, tutorials, the same things. For me, contact is not just face to face. It's actually, I'm online, I'm on the other side, I'm virtual.
Yes.
But the way that I built Moodle at this point is me being virtual.
Yeah.
It's my alter ego.
Yes.
But this is, I think it's more functional, and
Yes.
effective. I hope so. But
Yes, and you can have time restrictions on Moodle too. I used to tell my students on Moodle, I'll be online between these hours, and I stuck to it, and they got used to it. And then every now and then I deviated if I need to, but they knew that I was online for them during these hours. After 8 o'clock, no way am I going back on.
last year was a crisis.
Yeah.
Really, it was different, the lockdown.
True, that's true. But you do have to have boundaries. And so that's why it's important to say no. Because qualquer que me que vai me esse ele foi a mama le o ele. Ele esse finge. And so they would come. And meanwhile, I'm like stressing out because I didn't do my article, I haven't researched, I haven't done any marking. So, so what are the consequences of not saying no?
Hospital.
Oh, yes. Oh, Diane. Yes. Thank you for sharing the consequence. There's so many consequences. Okay, so how can we say no as a Samoan and as a non-Samoan, as a beautiful Italian woman here, Fiji, Indian, and where else we come as a New Zealand-born Samoan? How can we say no respectfully to what if VC comes to you and says, I want you to do a project. Or your dean comes and says, I want you to do this activity.
Yeah, write a concept note. Like this.
How
Yeah, right.
are you going to say no respectfully? No because you're overworked. No because maybe you don't even like the project they're suggesting. You don't even like the activity they want you to do. And you have a right to not like it. It might not be your passion. And you're already overworked. How can you say no respectfully with poise, as a Samoan, and dignity, as a Samoan man or woman?
That happened. I mean, it happens. Especially when your HOD or the dean wants the grades right up, okay, you have a few days, get it in, okay, like HOD, and I'm looking at these 800 students, and you have like 3 days, get all the exam marks in, and you just push it, and how I learned to say no respectfully, well, that's just an example, but there are other things. What I do is I go first into my office, I lock it, I cry and cry. Then I pray, because, in our Samoa culture, you must be respectful. Then I go to my heads or whoever, because, my heads are Samoans, so they should understand. And I explain everything and that. Well, it's usually worked. I don't know, I believe in these scriptures that yeah, but I have seen that it is very important to say no.
Yes.
Because we do need time for replenishment. And I have also seen students who accept it right away, but some students, they seem to know how to manipulate you, even if, they know. And also, I've had other students who have come to me to check their research papers or to give them advice. I don't even know who they are. And then I'll ask them, why don't you go to your own teacher, your own tutor? And for me, also, I'm saying,
Yeah.
You have to be careful, because there are students like that I think abuse the kindness of teacher.
Yes, and it can also cause ill feeling among colleagues. I don't know about here in NUS, but when I was in Auckland and Waikato, and even the Christian Institute called Bethlehem Tertiary Institute, because I was kind and generous and was popular with the students, it actually fueled some ill feeling amongst some of my colleagues. And they actually said to me, why are you giving those students too much time? You should stick to the law, stick to the policy. And so you do have to be careful that in your eagerness to serve and to love your students, that you are mindful of your other colleagues too. Because it puts unrealistic expectations on your other colleagues. Do you see what I'm saying? It's just something for you to think about. I'm not saying to change your kind nature, your yes nature, although I am saying you should learn to say no. But just be mindful of your colleagues and how they are perceived when they don't give as much as you do. Roberta, you had something to say?
Yeah, there are ways to balance. I mean, first of all, I think that to be multicultural and inclusive is very important. So each of us has a personality,
Yes.
and we need to go with it. I mean, the moment that you deny your personality, you deny your spirit, and this is not what God, I'm sure, has given us differences for.
Yeah.
So one is that. The other is depending on the situation and depending
Correct.
on the person.
Correct.
I have learned that there is another Samoan way, which is I send you an email. You really don't want to do it. You don't reply. There is absolute silence. And then, oh, sorry. I didn't receive. Oh, sorry, I didn't see it. So no, that's Italian. No, the Italian tells Brazil, go away. Students know it. Just general, go away.
Roberta. Thank you, Roberta. That's very true.
It's funny.
Dr. Ramona.
I learned that Roberta just recently.
Oh!
I kind of think, why won't they respond to my email? Because I have to go find them in their office, and then they're like, I'm busy, come back later. So something that might take one email response.
Yes.
I spend, remember that time?
Yes.
It's like 7 attempts.
Oh
It's
my.
actually a
7
no.
attempts. And then, and I was telling somebody, it's like, why won't they just respond?
I tell you.
And it's
Yes.
like, they're telling you no.
I have a funny example for you. For my research, I needed to put the team together. So if I say we need to go for a trip, on site, then I said, I'm going to get you now. This Saturday barbecue. Everybody replied. True story.
It does come down to values. They value food. Yeah. And Dr. Ramona, it sounds like Roberta put your email in eliminate or reject.
It would be so much easier if someone just said no, so that I know, like move ahead.
Yeah.
Because unfortunately, as something is designed,
Yes.
that person is part of it, so they need to have their involvement or their acknowledgement moving forward. So at a certain point, you have to make the call that you're going ahead without, but you don't want to overstep, hurt anybody's feelings, because later on, when our output's produced, they will be, you didn't involve me, didn't include me. So you have to have these lines where like, that's where I cut. I can't devote any more time to it.
Yeah.
And yes, you can't find a venue. You could spend a whole day trying to find a room. Spend a whole day trying to nail down somebody from facilities and multimedia. One activity that takes 2 hours, you're looking at admin, follow-up. They're not answering your phone calls, they're not answering the emails, they're not there.
Takes time.
So something that looks really small when it's an output produced
Yes.
might have taken 40, 50 hours. I wish I could put a timesheet. Follow up. And
That would be a good
the
research.
level of frustration that results in,
Yeah.
I could tell you, at one point I actually asked Ma about activity we did last semester where we went out to Savai to the training of the carers. And I told Ma, I said, can we just write this off at this point, because I can't fight the support services, I can't fight the funder. I said, this is too much effort. And I have to go it on my own. And she's like, just try a little bit harder. I'm Christian, but I just told her, and I'm Hindu, I'm like, for unity,
20%.
keep on trying. And we did get it, but we got it done. But at the end, nobody realizes what's happening in the background of that one activity.
Yeah. So what you pointed out, Ramona, beautifully is that we all have an impact on each other. We all have an impact. So if we decide not to respond to something quickly because you don't think it warrants a quick response, it actually has an impact on many other people. So it's something for us to think about.
I'm happy if someone says, no, I don't have time for that anymore. Just say no.
Yeah, just say no. Okay, so we're going to learn to say no. Yeah, it's
You say,
important.
no, I'm sorry, at this moment,
Yeah.
it happened to me with the Salmon Conservation Society. In this moment, I can't, I'm offline, because I'm very busy with other things. So sorry, I will get back to you later.
It's an interesting one, isn't it? Because we don't want to offend by saying no, but in the end we end up offending because we've delayed it.
Yeah, but people just need to know.
They
That's
need to
exactly
know.
what Ramona is saying. Just tell me, no, it's all good, this is work. So we need to be efficient, move on. Yeah?
Yeah.
So it's not about oh, I'm going to get offended, or you're going to get offended. No. Can you do this? No. Okay, thank you. Moving on.
Yeah.
Pragmatic.
Pragmatic, yes. Okay, moving on then.
Thank you.
Okay, because we've got, time flies when you're having fun. 3:15, 15 minutes, we'll stick to time. So forgive me if we do not finish, right? But it's very self-explanatory, what you've got there. Very self-explanatory. There are 2 articles here that are just so easy to read and understand. But let's go on. This is about scheduling. This is the 3rd key. So the first key was prioritizing, right? What is urgent, what is important, putting them into the 4 quadrants if you want. We talked about learning to say no, and that it's okay to say no. We can be respectful and say no, because it blesses everyone. And now the 3rd one is about scheduling. What does that mean? It means putting first things first. I don't know if you've seen this example of the rocks. And so the big rocks represent the things in quadrant 1 and quadrant 2 of that grid. It's the important things that you need to deal with when you're here on site. Important things, not urgent, important. And so what happens is, if you deal with all the little, go out for coffee, have a little chat in the corridor, check your Facebook, have a chat with a colleague, check emails, and some of the emails are like useless. They just do not assist you with your important task. Do you know what I mean? If you deal with all these little things, by the time you get to your important tasks, you're free to leave. You've got no time. This is your time. This is your 40-hour week, the glass. And what have you filled it up with? But whereas if you do the first things first, if you do the important things first, whatever it is for you, because you value it, then you put those into your schedule first, into your timetable, into your calendar, and then all these other little things can just fill it in later. Alright? But this is the key. Schedule only 2 or 3 big rocks in your week. That's the key. You do what matters most each day, and the other stuff will get done. Because either you eliminate it, or you delegate, or you do later. Okay, moving on. I basically said this. Meetings. How do you schedule meetings? If you've got lots of meetings, if you know you have lots of meetings, it's a good idea to schedule them back to back. Back to back. So that you just go one from the other. So if somebody wants to continue the meeting, so I'm very sorry, I've actually got a meeting that I need to go to right now, which is the truth. So you can go, your conscience is clear, you are free to go because you've got this other meeting. So actually booking them back to back is a good idea. But leave a day where there are no meetings, because there may be some spontaneous meetings. Sometimes, I don't know how you feel about this, but sometimes people might come into your office for a spontaneous meeting. If you feel comfortable to do this, you stand up. Don't sit down and talk. Why is that?
It's a hint.
It can prolong the meeting. It can take up your time. It's just an idea. Not everyone's comfortable with that strategy. Yeah. But you could stand up as somebody walks in, and that signals, I'm really working on something at the moment, but I do want to give you like 5 minutes, but I am working on something. It's just not everyone's comfortable with that strategy. Right? But something to think about. Ramona.
Recognizing that everybody's schedules are very packed. Normally when I come to someone's room and they're doing something and we don't have a scheduled meeting, I ask, is this a good time? Do you have some time to chat? And if it's no, can we schedule a time? So they tell you up front, yes, no, and how much time you have. So then you don't waste Yeah, I'm like the Roberta, the efficiency business, you know. You have time, yes. How much time? Good. We stick to that time, great. If not, we schedule it when, where, move on. And offer. So the same thing if someone comes, it's like, this is a really good thing to talk about. Unfortunately, I'm a little busy right now. Can we reschedule for this time? But I think we just get accustomed to like just be open about our commitments and our wants. Yeah. You can get through that. You can fast.
Yes. So that's why scheduling is important. It's more important to have your calendar up on your screen more than your emails. In fact, if you've got two screens, that's even good. That's even better. But it's better to have your calendar up because then you can schedule. You can put things into your calendar with some notes and some details. All right. Moving on. Okay, time robbers. These are the sorts of things that rob time from you as a faculty member, department member. Leaving tasks unfinished. Socializing, fun interruptions, attempting too much. That can rob you of your time because you end up stressed. And then you end up, in actual fact, neuroscience suggests that multitasking is not ideal. That the most successful people in life are actually focused on one task. That's interesting, isn't it? We thought multitasking was a wonderful thing. We women brag about being multitaskers at home. We can look after the children and cook and do homework with the child and tend to the husband or partner. We brag about being multitasking, but in actual fact it's very stressful. So attempting too much can actually make you ineffective. It can actually make you lose focus. Drop-in visitors, like I said, if they're dropping in, stand up. If you want to. Personal disorganization. Yes, oh my God. If you're not finding things very well and you're spending minutes looking for stuff, this might be a good time to start getting yourself organized. Because that's a time waster for a professional faculty member. Inability to say no, we've already discussed that. Procrastination, putting off tomorrow what you could be doing today. All right, nearly there. Oh, no time for research? I had to put this slide in. It's my prerogative. No time for research? Find the time. I know it's easy for me to say, and we've looked at the policy and we know the reality. But for those of us who have that contractual obligation, you will need to find the time. Talk to your dean, talk to your head of school. Come and talk to me. But don't carry that burden on your own. You do need to find some time. You need to prioritize it. You need to schedule it. You need to block out a time in your calendar where you can just think. Even if it's just thinking, you need to block that out. That's that hour or so in your timetable. So therefore, if you're doing research, you're not looking at your emails. All right? You're not looking, you don't want any non-research related email unless it's something connected to your email, then you respond to it. Otherwise, you do not address any emails that are not non-research. And then find the best place with minimal distractions. Find somewhere where you can go and do an I don't know where you might go to do that little bit of research. I think Dr. Pesata, can staff go off-site to a place to do their research if they've blocked it some time? Or must they do it on-site? I don't know what the rule is.
It's very flexible for academic staff to go to research They don't have to sign the book like us.
Wonderful. So you can go and have a coffee somewhere and read an article and annotate it. You know, just treat yourself. Treat yourself. I sit
Yeah,
on
but
the...
you said something very important, which is actually the time to think. That's why
Yes.
anything else, because you just sit and think. This is very important in research.
Yes,
So that's a time where you organize everything, well, at least in my experience.
yes,
And then there is the time for action.
yes,
But you need that time
yes,
because there are so many distractions.
Yes.
So
Yes.
I thought one day I just blocked it. Told my students, you dare to come, I'm going to bite you.
And that's why we do not sign the book, the signed book.
That's right.
That's exactly the logic why we acted, do
Yeah.
not sign that.
Because of the flexibility. Sometimes also you have to arrange it in a way that is not a particular way that you had allocated, but
Yes.
if you include students in your research or
yes, yes.
then you are doing it actually at other times. But and you have that flexibility of not signing in and out in a point.
And what's lovely, and Martin, when I went round with Martin Carey he went to share some of the policies, and he kept saying, he said, people that stay long in tertiary teaching and learning and research and so on, are people who feel that the university gives them authority and autonomy. And I love that. No one really wants to be micromanaged, but to have that autonomy and authority. So if you scheduled an hour where you went away and had a coffee somewhere, or sit on the gully, research, you should feel free to do that because we trust you. You're going to think about ideas, and that's when I believe divine inspiration happens, when you're not stressed, when you're happy. So scheduling is a very, very important part of your professional life. Do not feel guilty. All right? And I think we're finishing on time. It's 3:27, and all right, we're finishing. Ramona.
Just one thing I want to raise, probably this is not the right space, but I have enough. In terms of the output that is produced, some people spend a lot of time on things that do require a lot of research. For example, curriculum review and design. It requires a lot of reading if they're doing benchmarking and they do produce an output that gets utilized later on.
Yes.
So while it does not align with what is considered like that standardized research output as a journal publication, it did require an extensive amount of research to produce that output. That if, as had been mentioned earlier, as in difference for policy to have guidelines, and perhaps guidelines can also be, to be utilized. And also some people do a lot of grant writing that also takes research and writing, and it gets, something gets submitted and sometimes they get money coming in, but it doesn't count as an output. But there was output, you got some money. Some people are still working on building their academic writing skills, because writing for journal publications is completely different ballgame.
Yes.
So that if someone's written to like an academic blog, they put an op-ed piece in the newspaper, if those things can also be considered in terms of output. Because while we do appreciate, being able to go out and have a cup of tea and so, I'm a really slow writer. I failed a lot of my writing classes coming up. And that's why I'm not fazed by the red ink. I'm like, I'm accustomed to that. Whatever. You give me the feedback, I will take it and for me to improve, because I know this is an area for improvement.
Yes.
The English is my first language. And I'm still, working really hard on developing that. So we're all at different stages in that development process.
Yes.
So it's to recognize where people are and to acknowledge what they're able to produce, as opposed to saying this is just not good enough, it's not at the level. And different journals have, these matrices about impact, and so we may not be at the point to submit to those types of journals just yet. But wherever we can, that there is some recognition of it, because it can be incredibly demotivating.
Yes. And discouraging.
Yes.
Thank Thank you, Ramona. Dr. Bissetta, the 40 said the same thing. They said the same thing. They said, could we review our policy and perhaps reframe them as guidelines? And could the university value different sorts of outputs in publication, not just peer-reviewed journal articles? And so I explained to them the pressure that universities have in order to be ranked and to be recognised internationally. Under the current system, we do have to have published peer-reviewed journals, right? But we've got wonderful staff already on board who are addressing that very nicely. But what Ramona's asking for, as did Futi, as did Oloamanu today, was could we value other forms of output? And that's a discussion, I know that we do, but you want it to be written, right? Acknowledged in written form. So that's a conversation. Dr. Bissetta?
Currently, the policy acknowledges for TVET staff project reports.
Yes.
The problem is we haven't actually put out what do we mean by that. We need to put out like a template for the staff to follow. An acceptable template as project reports. So you don't want a 50-page project report. We just want like a one-pager or 2 pages just highlighting what they did and what they found out, or why it didn't go the way they thought it should, which is something. But the idea was for the TVET staff, it may mean 5 of these small projects could be equivalent to an article in terms of points. Not necessarily in terms of standing, but it's trying to find that equivalence because we can never try and use one standard to measure the different professional requirements in, for example, in the maritime sector, the trades. So it's that work is still in progress, hasn't it? But we do understand that there's also a document for the research outputs policy, which has acknowledged some of the research outputs that have been mentioned as part of. But the policy on internal promotion is very clear, and we have adopted best practice from overseas. One of the struggles that we face is that we're always dealing with people who compare us to non-university entities locally, because there's no other national university or government. So it's very difficult when it comes to accountability of funds that are poured into NUS. They always default back to comparing us to other SOE, other state-owned enterprises or non-profit making beneficial bodies, and which is very wrong. That's why they always question why we have certain staff members who are academics who do not sign in attendance. So from an audit accountant perspective, we understand why they're saying that, but the problem is they can never understand the perspective of academics. But as enlightened academics, we know their point of view, but they don't want to know our point of view. So that's the challenge that we always face with these bureaucrats from government, that they always want to follow the money and be accountable for every cent. And then, so the challenges that we face is that they always compare us to the locals, but we want to adopt best practices from overseas so that we can safely say that our standards are benchmarked to other universities around the region and overseas.
Thank you, Dr. Peterson. All right, well, time is up. We will finish by reading this wonderful scripture. Who would like to volunteer to read this one? Someone down the back? Thank you.
Awa ko ina mai ate sato ele atua le anganga whiwhi ai. A le mana ma le alofa ma le amiu kumilia.
Amen. And in English, please, a volunteer. Thank you, Mark.
For God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power and of love and of a sound mind.
Workshop, and hopefully it has been a blessing to you. And thank you for all the participation, and I've written down the comments from Mona. I've written the one that you just said, all right, to continue the conversation and continue looking at reviewing things for the betterment of our staff and then, of course, with our students. All right, may I ask who would like to pray? Actually, may I ask Dr. Pisica to take the honor of prayer of gratitude and then afternoon tea.
Sofia, eu, Matheus, eu,